What if I told you there's an explosion that happened over a century ago that we still can't fully explain? One that flattened 800 square miles of forest without leaving a single crater? Or a flood so catastrophic it carved the entire landscape of a US state in a matter of days, something that geologists refused to believe for decades because it was too violent to be real. Those aren't even the most terrifying events on this list. Today, I'm breaking down the most violent, catastrophic, and mind-bending events ever recorded on Earth. Real events, real science, and in almost every case, questions that scientists still can't fully answer. Segment 1. The Tunguska event. The explosion with no crater. June 30th, 1908. Siberia, Russia. A remote stretch of forest so empty that the nearest town was 40 miles away. At 7:17 in the morning, something entered Earth's atmosphere traveling at an estimated 33,500 miles per hour. It never hit the ground. It didn't need to. At roughly 5 to 10 kilometers above the surface, it detonated. The explosion released energy estimated between 10 and 15 megatons of TNT. That is approximately 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The shockwave flattened an estimated 800 million trees across 830 square miles of Siberian forest, all of them pointing outward from a single point, like a clock whose hands were all frozen in the moment of detonation. The pressure waves circled the Earth twice. Seismic stations across Europe detected it. The night skies over London and Stockholm glowed bright enough to read newspapers outside at midnight for 3 consecutive nights, caused by dust suspended in the upper atmosphere. Here's where it gets disturbing. There is no crater. There are no confirmed fragments. Whatever caused the most powerful impact event in recorded human history essentially erased itself. For decades, scientists couldn't even reach the site because of how remote it was. The first scientific expedition didn't arrive until 1927, 19 years later. Current leading theory, a rocky asteroid or comet fragment approximately 50 to 80 meters wide disintegrated completely in the atmosphere before impact. The airburst alone did everything. We have never recovered a single confirmed piece of whatever caused it. An explosion 1,000 times the power of a nuclear weapon. No crater, no fragments, no complete explanation. If it had entered Earth's atmosphere at a slightly different angle, it would have arrived 4 hours later, directly over St. Petersburg. Segment 2. The Chicxulub impact. The day everything died. You already know what this event caused. You probably don't know what the actual physics of it looked like. Approximately 66 million years ago, an asteroid estimated at 6 to 9 miles wide struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico at a speed of roughly 40,000 miles per hour. The impact released energy equivalent to approximately 100 trillion tons of TNT. That number is so large it functionally has no comparison in human experience. In the first second after impact, the asteroid had already punched completely through Earth's crust. Rock on the scale of mountains was launched into space. A fireball expanded outward across thousands of miles. Within minutes, superheated debris re-entering the atmosphere was triggering firestorms across the entire Western Hemisphere. The crater it left, the Chicxulub crater, is 93 miles wide and 12 miles deep. It still exists today, buried beneath the Gulf of Mexico. Here's what most people don't know. The impact itself may not have been the primary killer. The global winter that followed, triggered by billions of tons of dust, soot, and sulfur compounds blocking sunlight for potentially years, is what drove the mass extinction. Photosynthesis collapsed. The food chain disintegrated from the bottom up. An estimated 75% of all species on Earth were wiped out. Scientists studying the impact site found a layer of iridium, an element rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids, in geological formations all over the world. A thin line of chemical evidence marking the exact moment the Cretaceous period ended and took 75% of life on Earth with it. The most violent single event in Earth's last 100 million years. And the crater is still there, right now, sitting beneath the water. Segment 3. The Carrington event. the storm that would destroy the modern world. September 1st, 1859. British astronomer Richard Carrington was observing the sun through a telescope when he witnessed something no human had ever documented: a sudden, intense flash of white light erupting from the sun's surface. 17 hours later, the most powerful geomagnetic storm in recorded history struck Earth. Telegraph systems across North America and Europe simultaneously caught fire. Operators received electric shocks from their equipment. In some locations, telegraph machines continued transmitting messages after operators physically disconnected them from their power supplies, running on energy induced directly from Earth's magnetic field by the storm. The aurora borealis was visible as far south as Cuba, the Bahamas, and northern Mexico. In the Rocky Mountains, gold miners woke up in the middle of the night convinced it was dawn because the aurora was bright enough to read by. Here's where it gets genuinely terrifying for the world we live in today. A 2013 study by Lloyd's of London estimated that if a Carrington-scale event struck Earth today, it would cause between $600 billion and $2.6 trillion in damage in the United States alone. Power grids would go down. Satellites would be disabled. GPS would fail. The internet's physical infrastructure, the transformers and substations running it, would be destroyed, and many of those components take 12 to 18 months to manufacture and replace. A 2012 solar storm narrowly missed Earth by approximately 9 days. The head of NASA's heliophysics division called it a Carrington-class event. If it had struck, we would still be rebuilding. In 1859, it burned telegraph wires. In 2024, it would burn civilization's infrastructure, and we have no system in place to fully prevent it. Segment 4. The Missoula floods, when a glacier dam broke. Picture a lake the size of Lake Ontario, held back by a wall of glacial ice 2,000 feet tall. Now picture that wall failing. Between 15,000 and 13,000 years ago, this happened repeatedly in what is now Montana. Glacial Lake Missoula held an estimated 500 cubic miles of water. When the ice dam fractured, that water released in a flood so violent that it drained in approximately 48 hours. The floodwaters reached estimated speeds of 65 miles per hour. Walls of water 800 feet high swept across the landscape. The flood carved entire geological formations, the channeled scablands of Washington state, a 16,000 square mile region of stripped bedrock, dry waterfalls, and massive river channels, in a matter of days. Here's the part that science got spectacularly wrong. When geologist J.H. Harlan Bretz proposed in 1923 that a catastrophic flood had created the scablands, the scientific community rejected him almost completely. The geology was too violent, too sudden, too catastrophic to fit the accepted model of gradual geological change. He was ridiculed for decades. In 1940, evidence of the glacial lake source was found. In 1979, 56 years after his original proposal, Bretz received the Penrose Medal, the highest honor in geology. He was 96 years old. The Missoula floods didn't happen once. Evidence shows this cycle repeated approximately 40 times as the glacier advanced, re-dammed the lake, and then broke again. 40 catastrophic floods, each one reshaping hundreds of miles of landscape in 48 hours. The geology of an entire region was written by events so violent that scientists refused to believe they happened. Segment 5. The 1815 Tambora eruption, the volcano that canceled summer. Most people know Krakatoa. Almost nobody knows Tambora. That's a mistake. On April 10, 1815, Mount Tambora on the island of Sumbawa in present-day Indonesia erupted with a force that remains the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history. The explosion column reached an estimated 27 miles into the atmosphere. The explosion was heard 1,600 miles away. The immediate death toll from the eruption itself, pyroclastic flows, ashfall, and tsunamis, is estimated between 10,000 and 11,000 people. But that's not why Tambora belongs on this list. Tambora ejected an estimated 100 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the upper atmosphere. The sulfur dioxide released formed a global stratospheric aerosol veil that reduced incoming solar radiation across the entire planet. 1816 became known as the year without a summer. In New England, there was frost in June and snow in July. Crops failed across Europe and North America. In Ireland, a famine killed approximately 65,000 people. In China, the summer monsoon failed. Across the entire northern hemisphere, average temperatures dropped by 0.4 to 0.7 degrees Celsius, a seemingly small number that translated into civilizational disruption. Total estimated deaths attributed to Tambora and its aftermath between 71,000 and 122,000 people. The eruption lasted approximately 2 hours on the evening of April 10th. The death toll compounded for the next 3 years across 4 continents. A single volcano in 2 hours disrupted the global climate for 18 months and killed over 100,000 people across the world. Segment 6. The 1908 to 1918 Messina earthquake and its hidden legacy. At 5:21 in the morning on December 28, 1908, the city of Messina in Sicily, Italy, was struck by a magnitude 7.1 earthquake. The shaking lasted 40 seconds. Within those 40 seconds, an estimated 75 to 80% of all buildings in the city collapsed. The earthquake was immediately followed by a tsunami with waves reaching up to 40 feet that struck the coastline within minutes, hitting survivors who had fled collapsing buildings toward the water. Between 75,000 and 200,000 people died. It remains the deadliest earthquake in European recorded history. Here's what makes Messina haunt seismologists today. The entire city was built directly above a fault system that geologists had already identified as active. Buildings were constructed with no seismic considerations. Emergency response infrastructure didn't exist. The death toll was not just a geological event. It was a failure of every system human civilization had built around it. The ground shook for 40 seconds. The systems failed for decades of decisions made before that morning. Segment 7. The Lake Nyos disaster, when a leak exploded with carbon dioxide. August 21, 1986, Lake Nyos, Cameroon. A crater lake sitting above a volcanic magma chamber that had been slowly saturating the deep water with carbon dioxide for years. Sometime during the night, something, likely a small landslide or minor volcanic disturbance, triggered what scientists call a limnic eruption. The lake turned over. The deep CO2-saturated water rose violently to the surface and released an estimated 1.6 million tons of carbon dioxide in a matter of minutes. The gas cloud, heavier than air, rolled down the surrounding valleys at an estimated 45 miles per hour. It was invisible, it was odorless at those concentrations, and it displaced oxygen so completely that animals and people died within minutes of exposure. The cloud traveled approximately 15 miles. It killed an estimated 1,746 people and 3,500 livestock. Survivors reported waking the next morning surrounded by dead bodies with no memory of what had happened. The CO2 had rendered them unconscious before they could understand what was occurring. Entire villages simply went quiet overnight. There are at least 2 other lakes in the same region, Lake Monoun and Lake Kivu, with the same volcanic CO2 saturation conditions. Lake Kivu sits on the border of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Its watershed holds an estimated 2 million people within range of a potential limnic eruption. Scientists have installed degassing systems in Lake Nyos. Lake Kivu remains largely unaddressed. A lake that explodes with invisible gas, 1,746 people dead in under an hour, and the conditions exist in multiple locations right now. Segment 8. The Chelyabinsk meteor, the warning shot nobody prepared for. February 15, 2013, Chelyabinsk, Russia, 9:20 in the morning. Dashcam footage. Ordinary Russian dashcam footage captured the moment a meteor approximately 20 meters wide entered Earth's atmosphere at 41,000 miles per hour. The fireball became briefly brighter than the sun. Then, at an altitude of approximately 18 miles, it exploded. The airburst released energy estimated at 400 to 500 kilotons, approximately 30 times the energy of the Hiroshima bomb. The shockwave shattered windows across 6 cities. Over 1,600 people were injured, the majority by flying glass from windows that had been blown inward by the pressure wave. Here's what made Chelyabinsk a scientific wake-up call that the world largely ignored. It arrived from the direction of the sun, making it completely invisible to every asteroid detection system we had. The most powerful impact event in over a century hit Earth with zero warning. On the exact same day, purely by coincidence, asteroid 2012 DA14, a separate object 150 feet wide, passed closer to Earth than our own weather satellites. 2 separate impact events in 24 hours, one that we saw coming perfectly, one that we never saw at all. The official U.S. congressional testimony following Chelyabinsk estimated that there are approximately 1 million near-Earth objects of Chelyabinsk size or larger. At the time of that testimony, we had cataloged fewer than 1% of them. A 20-meter rock injured 1,600 people in broad daylight with no warning. We are still not looking hard enough at what else is out there. Segment 9. The 1859 versus today, the event we are not ready for. We already covered what the Carrington event did in 1859, but the full picture of what scientists have found since requires its own moment. In 2012, a research team analyzing ice cores from Greenland found evidence of a solar particle event that struck Earth in 775 AD. The carbon-14 spike embedded in tree rings worldwide was so large that the research team initially doubted their own instruments. When the data was confirmed, the calculation was staggering. The 775 AD event was approximately 100 times more powerful than any solar storm measured in the modern era. We do not know what it would take to produce an event of that magnitude again. We do not know the recurrence interval. We know it happened once. We know the sun is capable of it. That is the complete boundary of our certainty. The most violent events ever recorded on Earth are not always the ones that leave the most rubble. Some of them are the ones that tell us what the planet is still capable of producing and what we are still completely unprepared to survive. So which event shocked you the most? The explosion with no crater? The lake that suffocated 1,700 people with invisible gas? The meteor that arrived from the sun and hit us without a single second of warning? Tell me in the comments which event you think humanity is least prepared for if it happened today. And if you want more content breaking down the most extreme, violent, and scientifically mind-bending events on this planet and beyond, hit subscribe because we're just getting started.